Aaron Gershon from catspaws.com, Kentucky's 24/7 site, joining me now to preview Saturday's matchup between Kentucky and Vandy, the ninth-ranked Kentucky Wildcats. Aaron, I think it's the biggest meeting between these two
Yeah,
teams in a long time. I mean, obviously, from you go back to the 70s and 80s with this rivalry, but at least,
yeah,
we're younger. So I mean, 2012 through 2015, 16, there were some huge games, but ever since Bryce Drew got to Vanderbilt and even Jerry Stackhouse, they didn't feel like they had a lot of meaning. It feels like
no,
this one Saturday has a has a good bit of meaning.
yeah. There's no doubt about it. This definitely feels like the biggest. I mean, outside the I mean, those games, it's hard to gauge. It just feels bigger when it's on campus somewhere, and the fact it's going to be in Memorial Gym. Obviously, I think you're going to see the most Vandy fans at a Kentucky Vandy game in quite some time, right? That's a building that Big Blue Nation typically takes over, and I'm sure they'll have their fair share of people in the seats. But Vandy's got a great thing going right now. 15-4 on the inside looking in of the NCAA tournament bubble. I think last four in was the last I saw, or last four buys from
Yep.
Joe Lenardi. So off to a really good start. It's a team that Kentucky has a lot of respect for, speaking with Mark Pope today. And it should be a lot of fun. Honestly, it should be really fast paced with the way Vandy plays.
Yeah.
And they play small, and Kentucky loves to go up and down the court. So could be a high scoring kind of track meet like Kentucky's played in a couple times in SEC play already.
Yeah, with both these coaches and what they've done, it's kind of similar. Obviously Kentucky's got more talent. I think we can all agree on that, and they will be the favorite. Not going to be some crazy favorite like we're used to seeing. I mean, we saw some crazy lines the last 3-4 years for these Kentucky Vandy games. I would guess it's 4-5, if that, maybe even a one possession spread. But with what Mark Pope has done, have you been surprised by how they've been able to win games early this season, or is this kind of what you expected because we all knew they got talent in,
Right.
but can you always make them play well together and build that chemistry? But it looks like they've done that. Has any of this surprised you?
Yeah, they've definitely exceeded expectations for sure. Vandy's going through the same exact thing. When you have zero returning players and no continuity whatsoever, I mean, it's really hard to gauge where you're going to be at as a roster and where you're going to be at as a team. And Kentucky, 3 games into the year, goes down to Atlanta. They're, I think, 6.5, 7-point dogs against Duke, rightfully so. And they go win that game. And we look at what Duke's doing right now. They're probably the best, if not maybe second best team in the country, arguably with Auburn. So, and then Kentucky goes to Seattle and beats Gonzaga, and you're like, wow, this is coming together a lot quicker than anyone could have imagined. And you're still seeing some growing pains given the continuity. I mean, you had the loss at Clemson. They played terrible, worst game they played all year against Ohio State. Georgia just kind of outslugged them in Athens. Like, it's not a perfect team by any means, but the continuity, the fact they're fourth in the country in assist to turnover ratio with all this newness and no continuity is super impressive. And the fact they're comfortable in this offense where you have so many guys that played in completely different styles. For example, Lamont Butler, Kentucky's point guard, who I think was just named a second team midseason All-American. He spent 4 years at San Diego State playing in one of the slowest offenses in the country and one of the least heavy 3-point volume offenses. And now he's playing in a very heavy 3-point volume, really quick paced offense. And he's having the best offense this season of his career by a mile. And it's really impressive how those little things have come together and gotten this team off to a start that this fan base is very, very pleased with. I mean, to be, I think, 14-4 overall, with a 6-4 quad one record, 5 top 15 wins. I believe it is now. I mean, that is as good of a start as you could ask for, honestly, all things considered.
You're looking at the stats on this Kentucky team. You got 6 guys averaging above 9 points a game.
Yep.
So the wealth is spread out. Otega Away at 16 a game. You mentioned Lamont Butler there at 14. Jackson Robinson, man, he's had some games where he's just shot the lights out and has really led them. You've got Kobe Brea who can get loose. Andrew Carr can shoot it. Heck, Garrison's getting out and shooting it right now for Kentucky. So give Vanderbilt fans an idea of who are the guys to keep an eye on. I asked that. You might say
No.
6-7 guys,
Yeah.
but But like for Vanderbilt fans that don't know this roster, and Kentucky might be the same way
Sure.
with Vanderbilt, who are a few guys to watch on this roster that if you let get loose, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah, look, it's a game by game basis. I'd say Otega always been the most consistent scorer on the team. And, he's not a guy who's going to light it up from three. He's shooting 35.9% there. He's only taking maybe 2 or 3 threes a game, but he's scored in double figures every single game this season so far. He loves getting to the rim, and he's really effective when he gets there. I think he's second on the team. It feels like he leads the team in steals at 1.7 a game. And it feels like every time he gets a steal, it leads to a transition dunk for him. So he's been the most consistent scorer on the roster. I'd say if Kobe Brea has a big day, it's lights out for the opponent. It's just he's a pure shooter, right? I wouldn't say he's quite a one-trick pony because he can get in the paint and finish, and he's growing his game offensively, but at the end of the day, he's a 3 shooter. He loves to shoot it off the dribble. He's more comfortable there. And if you let him get any room, I mean, he's shooting 47.2% from 3. And that's only because he's had 2 or 3 rough games the last 3. Before that, it was at 52%, and it kind of stuck there almost the whole season. And, part of that's better defense in the SEC, but still that guy's just, when he's on, I don't think there's a game this year where he's hit 3 threes or more that they've lost. So usually when he's on, Kentucky wins. Jackson Robinson, you mentioned him. He's been playing a lot better of late. I don't know exactly what contributed to the slow start. He's the one guy in this system that knows exactly what he's doing in this system. Played the last 2 years at BYU with Mark Pope, and it just took a little bit of coming on. Maybe it's the pressure of Kentucky. Maybe it's the fact he was a near NBA draft pick and he's weighing that on his shoulders. But he's starting to come into his own. He 2 20-point outings against Mississippi State. I think he went for 27 in that. Went for 22 against A&M, and only went for 11 against Alabama, but got into some foul trouble that slowed him down. So, those are the 3 guys for sure. I mean, Lamont Butler's just a steady player, but he's shooting 39.6% from 3. It's a little misleading because he had a 6 for 6 day against Louisville, which was just beyond impressive. Scored 33 points in that game. But, those are the top guys. But one guy, that we didn't touch on that lately has been coming on too off the bench is Ansley Almanor, a 6'7" forward and transfer from Fairleigh Dickinson. He, the last 2 games, I believe, has scored in double figures. Yeah. And, or 3 games. I'm sorry. I think he scored in double figures against A&M. Oh, okay, just short against A&M, but went for 11 at Mississippi State. And what he did at the Mississippi State game, he was wasn't really being used much, wasn't playing much, and they put him in the game with about 5 minutes left, and he hits 3 threes down the stretch to kind of seal it. So he's a guy who, when he gets hot from 3, he's a knockdown shooter as well. So they come at you a lot of ways offensively. They're a work in progress defensively, but just about every player on the court except for Amari Williams is a threat from 3. Brandon Garrison, you mentioned he's starting to step back. That is a very much a work in progress. It's kind of every time he shoots it, you hold your breath. But he's a guy who didn't shoot any threes at all. Literally didn't take a single attempt at Oklahoma State last year. But he's work in progress. So yeah, they come at you a lot of ways offensively.
You mentioned some of the struggles defensively. That Alabama game. It looked like I felt like I was watching an NBA game where both those teams are similar style. They'll score a lot of points. They'll give up a lot of points as well. And if you put truth serum on Nate Oates and Mark Pope, they're probably fine with that for the most part. They'd probably rather play better defense, but they also want to score points and get the win. So defensively, where can Vanderbilt win defensively? Where can they win possessions in your mind? Obviously, Vanderbilt's not the biggest team. They've got some scorers though. So where can Vanderbilt attack this Kentucky defense and have a little bit of success, you think?
Yeah, it's running them off the 3-point line is the biggest thing, and being physical there. Kentucky has struggled with teams that have really made it hard for them and picked them up full court, half court, just trying to shorten the possession, or I'm sorry, not shorten it, actually make it longer, because Kentucky wants to get a shot off within 10 to 12 seconds of the shot clock, if not sooner. Once they get into having to continue to run things, and not that they don't run good stuff, they do, but it's just they start to get uncomfortable and they start to want to rush up a shot, and they really do struggle against physicality once it's out there. Alabama did a really nice job with that. Really all 3 teams that beat them, it's been just being really physical up there. And then it's just shot selection for Kentucky too. It's just like with Alabama. Kentucky's not going to take tough twos, but once they get frustrated at times, sometimes they'll get those lazy bad twos. Sometimes they'll get Amari Williams to rush up something in the paint when he's posting up, where both him and Brendan Garrison, they're still works in progress offensively, finishing at the rim. So those are the big two things. If you can run them off the 3-point line with physicality, that's where Kentucky struggled the most. And and keeping them off the glass as well. Kentucky, just like any team really, has feasted when they've gotten second chance scoring opportunities. They're not as good of an offensive rebounding team as Florida or Texas A&M, but they are pretty physical up there too. They're not a bad rebounding team, I'd say. So those are the main things. It's really physicality has been the thing that has gotten Kentucky into trouble at times this year. They were much better against A&M. They haven't really seen it since the A&M game because they played Alabama, who's more, like you said, they play the very similar style. They're not too physical with you, and then obviously had a midweek bye here. So, still got to prove they can handle physicality. One game isn't enough for me to just say throw out all the issues they had earlier this year against it.
I brought this up yesterday on the podcast. I don't know that there's a single Kentucky player on this roster that has played inside Memorial Gym. Maybe Kobe,
maybe Jackson Robinson when he was at A&M and Arkansas.
Okay, and then Kobe Bryant. I know Vandy played Dayton in an NIT game, but that might have even been before Kobe Bryant was at Dayton. But I think that's interesting because last week in the Tennessee game, or after the Tennessee game, Igor Milicic talked about how it was louder in there than we expected, and I was surprised to hear that. Vanderbilt obviously has been, they haven't provided much resistance against Rick Barnes' Tennessee teams, but also they had some transfers, whether it's Darlington Dubois or Milicic or some of the other guys that hadn't played inside that gym as well. So maybe looking behind them at their coach, for the play. Now the coaches can go. They can go to the sideline now. That's been the case for the last 2-3 years, I think. But do you think that factors in? Is that something you're thinking about, or is that kind of
interesting? I think it helps having a coach that's played there. Obviously, Mark Pope has played in that building a couple times, so that helps a little bit. But it is interesting, and I did a quick look at it. Jackson Robinson, the 2 games played against Vandy, were both at his respective homes. Spent 2 years in the SEC. So not a single. Maybe Kobe Bryant, like you said, but that's a really good point I never thought about. But look, on the road this year, anywhere has been really challenging, as you've seen across the SEC. It's really hard to go on the road. I mean, Missouri looks like world beaters against Arkansas, and then they go to Texas and just get completely thrown out of rhythm. So Georgia too, they were looking really good, and they lost to a bad Arkansas team yesterday. It's a tough league to win on the road, and I think Kentucky, they started the year 0-2, I believe, on the road. They lost at Clemson, they lost at Georgia, and they kind of got that monkey off their back against Mississippi State. But it's definitely every time they go into a different environment, when none of these guys have played in it, it's going to present challenges. So I am curious to see that a little bit. It's always you definitely see some of the eyes kind of glancing and checking out Memorial Gym more so than others, just because it is such a different beast. But again, it does help when you have a head coach that has all these stories of playing at all these gyms. Pope was talking a little bit about a story of how he was playing there back in the 90s, almost missed a dunk and won something like that in a close game, and he was scared to death he was going to miss it for the repercussions from Rick Pitino. So this guy's been around, and obviously he can't go do it for him, but I'm sure he's sharing the insights of the oddities and the uniqueness and awesomeness that is that building. It's one of my favorite to go to every year.
Yeah, and it probably helps that Kentucky has the whole week off, which I think
they needed it from a health perspective more than anything.
Yeah. Ultimately, if they win, a lot of people probably be pointing at that. They got some rest, they got healthy. Anytime you can prepare for an SEC road game for a whole week, that obviously will help you. But a big game. It's going to be a big stage. It's on ESPN. Carl Ravitch and this is nothing new for Kentucky fans, but Jimmy Dykes on the call. It's the first time in a long time he's been on the call for a Vanderbilt home game. So that part of it feels good for Vanderbilt fans, but for you, what do you think happens? Because obviously we talked about how the line might be a 1-possession line. Maybe even 4. But what do you think happens, and how big is this for Kentucky?
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be a tight game. Really, every game Kentucky's won against a Power Five opponent this year has been tight. I mean, they've obviously had some really, really impressive wins in that group. But I think their largest margin of victory off the top of my head is either 6 against Florida, 5 against Mississippi State, 5 against Duke. It hasn't been much
Wow.
higher than that. So every game they really play, and then obviously the Alabama game was super close. They got blown out by Georgia and Ohio State, but every other Power Five game they've played in has been within 2 or 3 possessions. So it's not a team that's run anyone off the court, but it's also not a team that has been punked much at all. So I'm expecting a really close game. I'm expecting it to, again, I'm expecting more of a track meet than a defensive struggle. Kentucky is, I believe, their only loss this season when scoring at least 70 points is the Alabama game. So really the key ingredient to them is to get to 70. Really more so they want to get to 80 and 90 and ultimately even 100. They've cracked that, I think, 5 or 6 times this year. So look, I really, really love what Vanderbilt's doing. I think they're going to end up an NCAA tournament team. I really do. But I just think you mentioned it, having the week off, this team too, I'll tell you what, it's a big difference. And I don't want to go down the whole John Calipari rabbit hole, but Mark Pope really takes losing personally, and having his first loss at home in the building he played in. He only lost 1 game as a player. There was just a look in his eye after that game. And even, he was definitely over it, but you just see it in his press conference today. There's just, they're pretty locked in right now. And, they haven't lost back-to-back games this year. They have Tennessee looming. They know that one could be a really tough one. And I think they're going to pull this one out, but I really don't see it being more than a 2 to 3 possession game. I expect it to be kind of back and forth all game. Again, it's not really Kentucky's MO to run any quality teams off the court this year. It's just most of that is because their defense is just not where it needs to be. They can't get enough stops to kind of just pull away the way they really need to start being able to come March. But I like Kentucky in a close one. But again, this is not a game where in the past it's like if they lost to Vanderbilt, it's like, what's going on here? What's wrong?
Right.
I don't think it's that at all. If they lose this game, it's one, you give credit to what Vanderbilt's doing. It's a quad 1 loss. It's not the end of the world. But they have a tough one in Knoxville coming up right 3 days after it. So I think they'll grab this one, but again, would not be surprised if it goes the other direction. And I enjoy having Vanderbilt being super competitive because they're a team that Kentucky, unless the SEC makes a drastic change, which I don't think they're going to do, is going to play twice a year every year. And it's a lot more fun when these games are competitive. That's been the beauty of the SEC this year. Every single game Kentucky's played in, and really most of the games across the league have been fun watches, fun to cover for us when Kentucky's playing.
That's what makes it fun, that Vanderbilt is back of sorts. And I think some fans will like your tournament prediction there.
I just think they have enough talent to get it done, and I love what the first year head coach has done. Obviously, what he did at JMU last year, they beat up a pretty good Wisconsin team in that NCAA tournament, and they ran into Duke. That's okay, but Jason Edwards is a legit player. AJ Hogarth's been around forever. Devin McLaughlin, Mark Pope is in love with that guy. If you listen to his press conference today, so they've got the pieces, I think, to sneak in there, especially given how many quad 1 opportunities are in this conference, and they already have a top 10 win over Tennessee.
Well, and 2 great coaches in this game too. Probably top half in the league. There's so many good coaches in the league.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be really fun to see this one. 1:30 tip off on ESPN. That's Aaron Gershon from catspaws.com. He'll have coverage on Saturday. He'll be in Nashville, I would assume. And Aaron, looking forward to it. Hopefully we've got a good one on Saturday.
Hope so. I'll see you then.